Welcome to Which Way From Here Extras, where I provide bonus content to the main series. In this episode, I interview my sister Kirstin Labita about Timefields, a concept she created through an intuitive message she received. Kirstin is an intuitive writer who often gets direct downloads from universal consciousness as she writes. She is a creativity expert, design instructor, and healer who uses direct downloads, active imagination, and her source connection in her clearing practice to help people deepen their understanding of their life's work. It was so much fun for me to sit down with my sister and talk about her creativity process and what inspired her to come up with this really interesting concept of time fields. And well, I'll let her tell the story.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning about first where the idea of time field even came from. Like, how did that get born out of your brain?
Yes.
How did that happen? What's going on?
Okay, so I guess I should start with that I'm a commercial interior designer, and I've been doing that for 25 years. And I have a BS and MS in interior design. And my master's thesis was on creativity in the creative process because I have a deep interest in the creative process. And my thesis research led me to a man named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I think he goes by Dr. Mike. Actually, he passed away in 2018, but he is known as the father of positive psychology. And he's the man who developed flow theory. And there's actually a World War II tie-in with this, with your haunted Airbnb. He was a prisoner during World War II, though he must have been very young. And after World War II, he noticed that some people were able to move on from, what they experienced during that time. And some people were just caught and they couldn't move past, and they started to, not really thrive anymore. And he was curious about that. And that led him to psychology. And he ended up in the US, and he worked at the University of Chicago. And when he got into psychology, he wanted to explore his thoughts more on why are some people able to thrive and some aren't. But opposite of what they do typically in psychology is he wanted to study the people who are well, not the people who are sick. So that's why he's considered the father of positive psychology. And through all of his research, he ended up publishing a book in 1990, which is popular, called Flow Theory. And people use it everywhere. It's in popular culture now. They use it in sports and business and video game development. They use it in that most specifically in that field because the theory is, and I have to look it up. It says that we are in flow when we're in our optimal emotional state. So if we are, if we're thriving if the emotional state is bounded by a level of difficulty or challenge and skill level. So if what we're doing or feeling isn't too difficult or too boring, we find that we're in our optimal state. And when we're in that optimal state, time starts to change for us. And it kind of disappears and we lose track of time. And we've all, I think, experienced that at some point, especially when we're playing, like, oh my gosh, 4 hours just went by. And so he called that channel, and there's a graph that you can look up online where it's a channel of space and time, really, where you're in your most happiest, you're in a happy state. And so you're in flow. And then a time field is the opposite of flow.
Yeah. Cool.
Start
Cool.
there.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, I love the idea of the channel of time, like this invisible, like space that we've entered into and that we're traveling down
Yeah.
that accelerates it, like accelerates our experience of time,
Yes.
but in a way that doesn't feel um threatening or scary, but in a way that's pleasurable
Right.
because we're like doing the thing that feels in alignment of who we are.
That's right. Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. I love that. Okay. So yeah, so taking that idea, so there's like when we're in flow state where we're not too in mind, too caught up in our thoughts, too caught up in anxiety or obsession, because it's very easy to go one way or another with that. Um,
Yes.
it's like this that tunnel of time and flow state is so fragile, and that it's easy to fall off that track one way or another.
Yeah, it could be. Yes. So, that could show up as a creative block. I always look at it through the lens of creativity. That's a creative block that you have to get over. But, what are creative blocks? They're really emotional blocks, energetic blocks. So yeah, and it's good to know how to get past that block.
So yeah, so that let's talk about time fields.
Okay.
First, I'll have you define it as you've like thought of it and it came to you, and then go into all its properties and that kind of thing. So go.
Yeah. So that was quite the day. Can I just tell you about how, like, I just need to set up the scene.
Yes, please do.
So I'm on my way. I live in Rochester, New York. We're in the Finger Lakes, and I'm on my way to Keuka College, which is right on Keuka Lake, which is one of the Finger Lakes. And I was going there because a friend of mine is faculty there and asked me to give a lecture presentation to a group of freshman students on creativity, the creative process, critical thinking, and all those, kinds of things. And I jumped at the chance because it's my favorite topic. So I put together this lecture, and she told me, and I assumed there would be like 20 or 30 people there. And, as an interior designer, I always give presentations to clients, but I was still nervous because it was a larger group of people. Usually there's, like 5 people sitting around a boardroom table for me. So I start, as I'm driving through farmland and vineyards, I start giving myself a mental pep talk. Actually, it was an out loud pep talk.
Yeah.
In my car. I started by clearing myself, and I always, connect to my highest self and ask for protection. And then I just started saying things. Whatever came into my head, I just started talking. I was just talking to myself, which I often do. And the word time field fell out of my mouth, and I had no idea where it came from. And I think the statement was something like, I allow myself to stay in flow and not be caught in a time field. And even in that moment, because I said it out loud, I went, what? What's a time field? And I got a visual download, and I heard words too. And I think the words were something like, it's basically the opposite of flow. But the visual that I got was literally a field, if you're out hiking and you're in a field, and this field is at the end of a pond or a lake. And that area, is usually kind of marshy. So when you take a step, you don't know whether you're going to hit solid ground or you're going to hit water, and your foot's going to go through, and it's all muddy now. Your foot's all muddy.
Oh, wow.
So that's the visual I got. And if you think about that area, the water is not flowing. It's not in a current. It kind of seeps out from the lake or pond and stagnates and gets caught by silt or dirt or plant material, which is great for an ecosystem, but it's not so good energetically, when you're trying to move through things.
Yeah, it's impossible to walk through. Yeah.
Yeah. So, your foot goes in and it gets sucked down, and you lose your shoe, that kind of thing. So that's the visual that I got. And I went, oh my gosh, okay, that's cool. I'm going to need to remember to write that down when I get home because I was so in the moment of trying to not walk into the room shaking, nervous.
Right.
Um, so, so that's where it came from. It just landed in my head while I was trying not to be nervous one day.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
And so
Um,
then once you like you went you got you well first of all you spoke to 200 kids.
yeah. Yeah. It ended up being 250 kids plus faculty. So thank God I said those, calming statements in the car. And it went off well. It went great. Yeah.
Which is amazing. But
Yeah.
but you did remember the idea of Timefield and you went home and you started to journal about it.
Right. Yeah. I wrote it down. And I have, because I'm a designer, I had to, basically draw it. And if you think of a current with arrows, the current doesn't need to go in a straight line. If you think about a stream, it goes over rocks, it goes around things, it goes through things, but it's still flowing. So the arrows are all going in one direction. But the time field I drew as basically a puddle or a pool with the arrows pointing inwards. And uh, what I wrote down in my journal was these are overwhelm energies. So if we move past the analogy of the pool and move into energy, the overwhelm comes from our emotions, and it causes energies to either stagnate, slow down, or stop completely, like in the case of your haunted Airbnb. And then when we get into a time field, we start telling ourselves stories like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not loved. And then we start those stagnant energies and thoughts start to loop around.
Mhm.
And it goes into a repeat pattern,
Yeah.
looping around. And if you put your finger in a little pool of water and you loop it around, it starts to move inward. So those energies will move inward, it causes inward movement and it swirls around and it forms a vortex.
Dude, yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
Sucks you in.
it sucks you in and forms a vortex. And if you go back to that, putting your finger in the water, where is it going? There's nowhere for it to go.
Right.
So after you're done swirling around, it just stops.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, if
yeah.
it was a toilet, it would get flushed down, right? The vortex goes down the plumbing and it gets flushed away. And that's part of what energy healing really is. It flushes that stagnant energy away.
Right.
But because we're tied to both time and space, the vortex can co-locate in our minds and in the spaces that we inhabit. And this includes the earth itself. So that's why we encounter vortexes when we clear spaces and land, because we are it starts in our minds. Our minds are so powerful, but then it gets transplanted into the spaces that we inhabit, just like in your haunted Airbnb. And then it can even move into the earth.
Yeah.
And the earth has its own energetic infringements related to the past, like
Right.
war. Any war would be an energetic infringement because, think about all of the really intense emotional energy that happens during a war everywhere. The people that are actually fighting, the people they leave behind. Um,
Mhm.
so connecting to the emotional vortex from a current event to a past earth infringement can cause larger issues that need to be dealt with energetically from trained people like you and Amanda.
Right.
Um, and, past life infringements begin and end with people because people put them there with the example of war. So the people are we're the ones who need to clear them.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. And also like that makes me think about how the way that the Earth energetic grid has been tampered with.
Right.
that creates its own issues. And then people live on the land with that tampered grid, and that frequency, they get trained to that frequency, and that creates behavior patterns within families, and families
Yeah.
that stay on the land for multiple generations repeat those patterns, and that becomes intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
And so it just keeps informing itself over and over. And because
Yep.
humans are capable of creating fields, it reinforces it, and it's like this constant feedback loop between the land, the
Right.
people, and the reality in which we all exist in.
Yeah, yeah. And if you want another visual on that, I saw someone teaching about vortexes, and she pulled up, those static electricity globes that have that single thing, and then you put your finger on it
Yeah.
and it goes directly to, she did that. And like, if you're walking across the land and there's a vortex under you, it's tracking you basically, as you, because we have our own energy field. So,
Right.
that vortex is, pulling you in energetically.
Ah, that's fascinating. I never thought about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, and you look at the Airbnb, of going back to that example, and like that space was not only informed by generations of the family that created the time field itself, but now it's an Airbnb, and it was being fed by the individual staying there. And just the like little bits of them being in the space, looking at the World War II nostalgia decorations, participating in that, training their energetics to that space by occupying it for an extended period of time, even if it was just overnight. And you had earthbounds there feeding off of it. I mean, it was just this like, man,
Yeah.
was it just like
No
this,
wonder you got a headache.
right? Right? Like, no wonder I was sick when I
Yeah.
was in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we haven't even touched on memory, how memory ties into that as well.
Right.
That's another.
Which is fascinating because memory, like the memories warp, because
Yeah.
it's not even a true memory. It's this warped reality, warped version of memory that is
Mhm.
based on a nostalgic version, an
Yeah.
alternate reality version of memory.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And that's where the nostalgia becomes an illness.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And that's why I say, like, I use the term nostalgia trap, which I, of course, just made up on the fly. My favorite, I talked to a couple of people, and they're like, "Oh, I've never heard of these things." I'm like, "I know you haven't, because my sister and I made it up." We're just
We're
using these
going down in
words.
history for this. Yep.
Yeah. You're
Yeah.
welcome, world. The Labita sisters are on it.
Yeah. Well,
But
going back to your, oh, sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, so like I just kind of came up on the fly with the idea of nostalgia trap, but as a way, like those things are informing each other, like that our desire for a simpler, better time, whether or not that actually existed for us, we
Air quotes.
create, yeah, exactly, big air quotes around that, where it was like the childhood version of what we remember the past being through the filter of wish and desire, that erases the reality of the time period that we're idealizing, creating an alternate reality. But those memories feel oh so real in the moment because
Yeah.
of, again, our ability to create realities out of nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's correct.
Yeah. And so, like, memory as in like the way that we are manipulating and recreating reality through memory that is based on a nostalgia that we then fuel with our attention, disempowering our present moment because all of it is going to this alternate reality.
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
So,
Um, And don't forget that a time flow, as you mentioned earlier, flow can become a time field if you are in overwhelm. So my flow is thinking. I enjoy making new connections, coming up with new ideas. That's my favorite thing to do, research. But I can so easily go into a time field of my own making when I start to ruminate and I get overwhelmed. That person, I didn't like the way that person talked to me. And then I start, I'm famous for those looping thoughts and tossing and turning in bed at night. So flow and time fields are really interchangeable, depending on the person. Just like you said, we have the ability to create or uncreate that reality.
Very easily. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like and that's whoops, as I bump into things. That's a great uh thing where it's like, we don't want to create a weird stigma of time fields, right? It's so
Right.
easy to get too far down that road, but it's like we're doing this constantly. That
Right.
yeah, that going into flow and then accidentally bumping out of flow into a time field, creating that looping, that's easily done and it's easily collapsed if
Right.
we're
Well,
consciously aware. Yeah.
yeah, but I make a distinction between blocks and time fields. So
Okay.
I would say we are constantly running up against blocks, and we are easily able to get out of those blocks most of the time.
Okay.
So yeah, we're in flow. The flow bumps up against something. Your energy is blocked. But the reason why it's a time field and not just a field is because the element of time creates something that stagnates and continues to stagnate for an extended amount of time.
Okay.
So that way it's more than just a block. So I would say, no, maybe we can't get out of time fields easily, but we can get over blocks easily.
Okay. Okay.
It takes more effort to get out of a time field.
Yeah.
Emotional overwhelm, at the very far end, I would say PTSD
Mhm.
is emotional overwhelm time field, because you're caught in that emotional moment.
Exactly.
And it creates a physical reaction in your body. As someone who went through PTSD myself, I know how that feels. And it's very difficult to get over um, the extreme physical reaction to the emotions that you are feeling. So it's more than just a block.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of
And I
sense.
wanted to go back to something you said earlier about the Earth's grid.
Oh, yeah.
Um, I while I was preparing for this, I channeled that the Earth itself is holding the grid stable, so that the time fields can be cleared.
Mm.
Which is, so that's what we've experienced when those land issues that we've been coming up against. So, and then the rising of humanity will continue to clear the grid so that the stability mechanism, so to speak, it's not mechanical, but from
Right.
the earth will no longer be needed at some point, not in our lifetime, but sometime further down the road. But we're ushering it in. We're at the vanguard of um, helping, as you've said before, clearing the earth grid, but it's holding all of that stable for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sorry.
we're
Go ahead.
helping each other. No, I was just going to say, we're helping each other.
Exactly.
You and I have both experienced both land clearing and clearing ourselves at the same time.
Mhm.
So, which is pretty intense.
Yes. Very. Yeah. And that's the thing is like the old Earth grid has been dismantled. Like
Mm,
it's almost completely dismantled at this point, and a new Earth grid is
mm,
put into place.
okay.
And so, like, it makes sense that you're getting messages of like the Earth grid is now stable. And I think it's because the new Earth grid is coming into
Oh,
place. Now that the
okay.
old one has been completely dismantled and reintegrated and moved out.
Yeah.
So that's why like we're seeing so much chaos is because those old, dense, ugly, shitty energies are just no longer supported. No,
Yeah.
as resonance gone up, Earth grid is completely different now. So
Okay.
yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Right.
That is so cool. I love it.
So I've, since then, since that time and that vortex thing was the new information that I was working on. Um, now I've started incorporating the word time fields in my energy clearing, which I didn't think about before. I clear time fields for myself. And I have run up against, I think I told you recently, a time field related to the land nearby where I live, that
Mhm.
I use the word time field in my energy clearing now to get to the source of it quickly.
Yeah, I love that. That's cool. I definitely want to start looking for that as well. It's like it's not as if these things haven't always existed, but now that there's like a language, a word around it to like that's the
Yeah.
beauty of naming things, right? Like you create a shortcut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's code. Yeah.
Exactly. And now like that's in our conscious awareness. It's like, oh, now I understand that when I come across a person who is caught in a loop and I see that the behavior patterns that they find themselves in over and over and over again, I can see that as a time field, um, and get to the root cause more quickly using that idea and that language.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So cool. So cool to be on the cutting edge of this shit.
Right? I know.
That is absolutely fascinating. I can see like this being you like writing essays
Oh
and
yeah.
like
Oh yeah.
really. Do you have anything else like anything like to expand on time fields? I love that you came up with it as far as like creativity, but and yeah, it speaks to the psychology of people so well, like the behaviors of of modern society, of our like deadened mechanized society that we were all conditioned into, where like time fields are almost promoted by our media, by the way nostalgia is sold to us. Because if you're caught in a loop, you just
Mhm.
kind of do the same thing over and over and over again without thinking, feeling, expressing, being
Right.
an autonomous person, like that gets cut out. And so if you're in a time loop and you're going to your 9 to 5 day after day after day after day, like an automaton, like there's something like about the promotion of time fields within our society
Right.
that I
Yeah,
think,
that's a good point. Isn't there a saying that says, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
right,
So I guess going to work every day and expecting it to be different,
right.
if you don't make behavior changes, you're just going to be, unless your work is your flow. There are people who go to work and they're in flow every day, and that's great. But if you're not happy, if you're doing something, even Steve Jobs said, if you do something, go to work too many days in a row where it's not working for you, it's time to make a change. Just,
Ex-
get past that time field.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Like that's it's really interesting to see like most corporate culture, especially like the corporate culture of like the 80s and 90s, like it is all about promoting a time field for people to like you get like the constant 9 to 5, you are providing for your family, suck it up, buttercup, like, you know, if you're not working, you're not a worthy human being.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
whole that language that got like, especially if you look at like our parents and then how we were brought up, that it's just like pounded in our heads.
Right.
And then if you're lucky, you might retire and then
Right.
you can live your life the way you want. You're
Right.
not dead. You
Right. Right.
know?
Right. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
suffer from cancer or something. Like, yeah,
Right. And yeah. And coming from the world of architecture and interior design, where we bill by the hour. So, there's a productivity level of that. You got to be billable. You got to be billable at all times. Every moment of your day is accounted for. Because you charge it to the client, you charge it to the project, so you just get caught literally in that hamster wheel of, oh my God, I'm not worthy if I'm not being productive.
Right.
And then you come home and you're just exhausted and you can't be, with your kids in the way that you want to be. And you get up and you get to do it all over again the next day. So yeah, that is the definition of insanity, isn't
Right.
it?
Right. Where it's like productivity, not creativity.
Right? Yes. Isn't that terrible? We designers and architects go to school to be creative because we're attracted to that. And then you get into the corporate world and they're like, no, your time is billable and we got to maximize our profits. And so you need to be productive at all times.
Right. Right. Ugh.
Not creative, productive.
Productive. Yep. And it should be just this straight shot upwards with no like a consideration for how existence works, and which that there are ups and downs and ins and outs and contraction and expansion. Nope,
Right.
just one way, rocket
Right.
shooting up. That's all you get to do. And if you're not that, then you're a fucking waste, like
Yeah, rocket ship up if you're lucky.
right.
Otherwise, you're just spinning your wheels. If you're the right gender, if you're the right color, if you look the right way, it's a rocket ship up. Or if play the game right, it's good. You're good.
Yeah, like that's the expectation. It can never be the reality, and yet that's still put on people. Ugh.
Mm-hmm.
And no
Yeah.
wonder everyone's depressed.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Well, and then going back to your comment about media, then you go home, you turn on the news, and it is it's a literal constant loop of the same stories over and over again. And it's not even by the day. Like I haven't turned the news on in I don't know how long, but once in a while I will. And it's like, oh, different day, same story, different
exactly.
players, but it's the same stuff. So why it's not news? That's
It's conditioning.
yeah, yeah,
Conditioning. Exactly. Exactly. And then it's a miserable experience. So you've grabbed substances that numb so that you can
right,
handle your existence,
right.
and then rinse and repeat. Right. And it's just like, God, no wonder. So yeah,
Yeah,
like we live in a society that promotes time fields, that
right.
actually actively wants us in these things.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and because we're not taught and we are not aware of how powerful we are,
Hmm.
we don't realize that we are creating realities of these quiet, like of the quiet desperation that Thoreau talks about, to take it back to Transcendentalist.
Yeah.
Like most men lead lives of quiet desperation. And that's
Mhm.
because we are conditioned to do so, because that makes us the most productive automatons possible.
Right. Yeah.
Ew.
Right. Yeah. Getting out of it though is just as ew, like
Because it's hard.
because it's hard. It is so hard. You got to take lots of leaps of faith and that faith has to be in yourself.
Mhm.
And if you've been conditioned to not believe in yourself, then oh my gosh, it's hard.
Oh yeah, yeah. And everyone around you questions you,
Yeah.
especially parents.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah. No, it's quite the like, to extrapolate it out, it's like, whoa, what on
Right? Yeah.
earth?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's
I said
useful.
this before, but I think it's interesting how I work on things on a micro level and then you always take it out to a macro level and it's like, whoa, holy shit.
That's why we're a perfect team.
There you
I
go.
mean,
I'm
it's
the detail-oriented sister. You're the
the big idea, sister. That's
big
right.
idea sister. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like forever, the axiom as above, so below, as within, so without. I mean, we live in a fractal universe, so everything's going to be a reflection of itself. And so, like, to see the individual reflecting the social, and like how on an individual level, we can see how challenging it is to collapse a time field, right? To
Mm.
get out of these systems and patterns of behavior that we are literally conditioned on every step of the way on a socialized level where everyone around you wants to keep you just as caught as they are because it's all you've known. It's
Mhm.
considered the correct way forward. And to get out of it feels like death because
Right.
it is.
Yeah.
It is a type of death.
Mhm.
Um, and so to do that on the larger social level of collapsing social time fields is going to look like death.
Mm.
And it's going to look like chaos and everything else because everything has to rise to the surface for conscious awareness.
Yep.
And to look at it means to live it.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
that's what we're experiencing right now
exactly.
and have been for a while.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
People, and then, yeah, and then people get scared of the chaos.
And rightfully so,
Mm.
right? Because
Of
it's
course.
so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah. But to
And
them, all they see is chaos and don't see the underlying
exactly.
thing that's happening. Yeah.
Exactly. Because again, if you're not consciously aware of what's happening, and you're in your time loop, it's so easy to get caught in cynicism.
Mm.
Because cynicism is a disempowered state, but it makes you
Hmm.
feel really fucking smart to be like, oh, everything's terrible, and I'm such a realist, right? Like, um, but that cynical, disempowered state has nowhere to go. Like, what do you do with that other than just continue to collapse in misery and numb and all of that?
Right.
Which is why, like, I think, like, to take this to its possible conclusion, I always talk about how grounded optimism is literally the only way forward. And I think that is, again, the only way to really get out of a time field is to understand just how powerful we are, and then to see yourself out of the loop that you're in. You have to be optimistic enough that life can be so much better than as it is right now, that
Right.
it's
Yeah.
possible to have the kind of life that you want and deserve and to get into flow. And I do think that that's the what's happening right now outside of the chaos is that so many people are looking around being like, what was this?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was all of this that I was told was the only way forward? And it wasn't. It was just the
Right.
loop. Yeah.
Yeah. And
So
then and that leads to, the power of our minds. Our minds really are what our minds can be a time field, it's the same thing as looping thoughts. But our minds are what can get us out of it too if we just change our perspective. It's about moving the focal point off of what you're looking at, and maybe looking even just a little bit to the right or a little bit to the left,
yeah.
and your world opens up.
Exactly. Exactly. And I would say even like not even mind, but like body, like the
Yeah.
the felt sensation
Yeah.
of of possibility. And then your
Right.
thoughts follow that felt
Right.
sensation. Yeah.
Right. Well, it could go either way. There's a neuroscientist, another annoying person to listen to, but she's smart. Like, why do I find these annoying smart people? But she talks about, and I'm forgetting her name at the moment, but she's not the only one, but our bodies and our minds need to be aligned. If they're not aligned, then you're out of sync in your life. So if you're exhausted, if your body's telling you you're exhausted, and you still go to work and work, whatever, 9, 10, 12 hours a day, you're not in sync with your life because you're not allowing your body to rest. And it
Exactly.
goes the same way with your mind too. Something could happen with your mind and your body's like, I'm not so sure about that. And those two things have to come into, in synchronicity.
Yeah, agreed. Absolutely. Yeah, that heart mind connection is very real. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And one more thing about emotions, neuroscience is showing us that we hold physical pain and emotional pain differently in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So if I slam my head against the wall a year from now and be like, I'll have a memory of that, but I'm not going to actually maybe feel it again unless it was also an emotional moment. But if I have an emotional pain, I hold it in my body, and I can hold it in my body indefinitely
Yeah.
over many lifetimes, even I'm finding as I clear myself more and more. And that is really a function through your mind too, so our bodies and our minds are really working together. But if you're not letting it go, if your mind is not letting it go from your body, then it's trapped inside you.
Yeah.
And then that becomes another time field,
Yeah. Because then it's
holding emotional pain.
yeah, because you're like literally time traveling then.
Yes.
You have the
Yeah.
felt experience, and it's like you're traveling back to that moment and
Yeah.
reliving. Yeah.
Yeah. I just had a quick visual of that movie where it was about memory. The guy who wrote the messages all over his body. What
Yeah.
was that?
Memento.
Memento.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But you're right. Yeah, that is the perfect visual of the memento, the when we have the emotional pain and trauma, it is like we're writing that message on our bodies
Yeah.
over and over. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
All
awesome.
right.
This was perfect. This was
Good.
perfect. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Especially the time field stuff. I think it's gonna be so good um for the podcast. Yes.
So are you incorporating it in number 2, or is it going to be like an interstitial?
It's a really good question. My intention is to incorporate it into number 2, but we're going to see where the flow of the storytelling goes. So, I just know right now, starting with the discussion of Freemasons, um, and how they like the occult aspect of them, and then especially within architecture.
Yeah.
Um, and then going from there, picking back up the story of like getting into the space, how the space felt completely void, which is really crazy. I know I want to talk about entities, like what are entities, the experience of entities, how that's different from Earthbound, that kind of thing. Um, but like also just talking about the experience of the house itself and the owner, the all of that.
Mhm.
The theme of delusion has been really coming up quite a bit. Like me talking about like, the practices that I have to maintain as a clearer so I don't go into delusion. I didn't do that on purpose. I just wanted to explain why I do those practices. But then looking at the owner and how he's clearly taken over by this entity that the way, and like in the and then again the same with the Airbnb, the way that hope and love get twisted into delusion and obsession, which again
Mm.
turns into time fields, right? So I think
Right.
that's
Yeah.
how I can then insert conversation about time fields. But the distortion of these really positive emotions that we
Yeah.
normally as humanity cling to get out of difficult times, and the twisting of that is actually the thing that keeps you in the difficult time is really interesting.
Mm.
And so like, and then that, like, looking at the way that time fields and nostalgia traps disempower your present moment.
Right.
So where does all of that potential go? Because potential has its own energetic uh uh like texture that can be
Hmm.
fed upon. And so like the loss of your potential is getting fed upon by
Mm.
the machine, if you will, by a society that is, dependent on you being a cog, or by an entity that's in a house that is feeding off of, the living people that come through there, feeding them hope that is actually delusion that doesn't actually go anywhere. And it like continues that place of stagnation. And so that place has been rotting, but he's keeping it just enough alive.
Yeah.
And like new people come in to experience it, feeding the machine, right?
Yeah. Just like
Right?
going to work.
Just like going to work.
Oh my gosh, my boss literally said that to us. Feed the machine.
Ew.
Yes. When we first moved into our space, and oh my God, he literally said that to us because the finances were a little rickety when we first moved into a new space. They evened out. But you know what? Yeah. That building was literally leaking on my head. It was leaking everywhere.
It's just like you don't
Metaphor.
say
Yeah.
feed the machine as a motivation tactic.
Right.
What
Right.
the hell?
Right.
Like, did
Yep.
you not watch Terminator? Like, you don't feed the machine. Good
Yep.
God.
I'm not there anymore, Corinne.
For a reason.
Right. Yep.
Uh, uh, talk about being taken over. Good Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at as the theme of the next episode, and to tie it all together. And
Cool.
yeah, yeah. Should be good.
All right.
Great. Thank you so much for this. This was
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you. It was fun.
Good. Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Excited to get your voice in there, give you full credit for such a kick-ass idea.
Yeah. Metal.
Metal. Love it. All right, so I will let you go. I appreciate it, and I'll keep you updated with my progress, as chances are I will also be pounding my head against the wall with this episode like I did with the last one.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Have a
Thank
good rest of your
you.
week.
Love you. Thank you.
Bye. Love you too. Bye.
All right, so there you have it. You now know how the concept of Timefields came to be. It was from my awesome sister. I hope you all enjoyed that. It was fun to do that interview with her and just really hear about her process and what inspired her to even come up with the idea, or how it got downloaded into her brain, really. And you guys kind of got a sneak preview of where I think I want to go with part 2 of House of Wills. I am currently in the middle of writing it. It is a lot, just like the first one. And, the idea theme. What does this all show me to me, essentially? Because, if you follow me on Instagram and everywhere else, you'll always hear me talk about the way reality reflects you to yourself. Reality is a mirror made of fractals. So me going to these spots, these paranormal spots, it's always an opportunity to know myself in a greater way. And yeah, this time it's a much more humbling experience. So telling the story of me getting humbled is, it's not really fun, but it certainly is interesting. So anyway, that's what's going on. Thank you so much for joining me on this little bonus episode. I'm going to do some more episodes like this, whether it's extra content that helps inform the larger stories that I'm telling, like the House of Wills, or I'm also going to start doing smaller little episodes about like tarot, or maybe talking about what I know about astrology, which is not very much, but what I'm hearing other much more capable and talented astrologers saying, and then putting my own interpretation on what I'm personally seeing, kind of like an energetic weather update, if you will. I'm going to start putting those out as well in the meantime, because these bigger projects take a long time to create, and it's worth it, but I want to give you guys something to kind of chew on in the meantime. So yeah, go ahead, and if you haven't already, check out my Instagram, which period way period from period here. Check out the YouTube. And then if you want to follow me, just me, Corinne Labita, I'm the only one in the world. You follow me on Instagram as well. And here's some of the random tidbits of thought that hit me that I make reels about. So if you're curious to hear more of like, what does Corinne think is interesting right now? You can follow me on Instagram. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye for now.